now, Bite Squad membership program, unlimited deliveries from restaurants within 4-mile radius for just $5.99 a month. Quite a deal. But again, if you haven't used Bite Squad before, you do get your first delivery fee waived with Talk North. So get food for your mood delivered by Bite Squad. So they have their kicker for however long. It's interesting that I think it's a good signing, especially at the price. They get a good veteran kicker, and he's not killing them on the cap space, but also puts them in a position where if he has a couple bad games, they could move on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of a no-lose deal for the Vikings to re-sign Dan Bailey. And I think a lot of the reason that it happened at the price it did, Jason Myers got a nice, healthy contract. Steven Gostkowski was, still kind of is expected to re-sign with the Patriots. And after that, there was this glut of kickers who are all kind of in that same range. Fairly good, solid, but not overwhelming type of kickers. And I think Bailey fit into that. And as other teams were signing kickers, there weren't a lot of openings left. And so the Vikings kind of took that philosophy at that position. And frankly, I think they kind of did it too with the offensive line, where you had 3 or 4 of the top guards go or top interior guys go. And then the prices start dropping to where the Vikings in their cap situation could afford to make those moves. So I think Bailey was a good signing for them. And it doesn't necessarily preclude them from saying, okay, we're going to go with in the 7th round or after the draft, we're going to sign a free agent rookie and we're bringing them in for competition and we'll see what happens. And so I would not be at all surprised if there's a little bit of a competition to start training camp again, like there was last year between Daniel Carlson and Kai Forbath.
I will say I'm comfortable with Bailey. I mean, he's not the kicker he was in his prime, but I just feel like he's probably the most reliable option you're going to find right now.
Well, and here's the other interesting thing. Well, first of all, Marwan Malouf said when he was introduced as their new special teams coordinator that he would be comfortable with a rookie. But the thing that I really found interesting in talking to Mike Zimmer at the NFL Scouting Combine, he was talking about a lot about kickers, first of all, and perhaps the need to bring in a specific kicking coach. But he also mentioned a few times that, sometimes it's the holder, and we're not going to just say, okay, we need to have our punter be the holder. We're going to look at other guys potentially. And, he even mentioned Adam Thielen, who's done it in the past, and other position guys that could be the holder. And, it used to usually be that it was the backup quarterback was the holder. Brad Johnson did it for a long time, and other quarterbacks have done that. But I think teams have generally gotten away from that philosophy because kickers, long snappers, and punters spend so much time together when the rest of the team is practicing that they can then have their routine and they can work for an hour during practice on their own while offense is going against defense and individual drills are going on. And so it did make some sense. But, if Matt Weil, their punter, is or was part of the issue for some missed kicks last year, then I wholeheartedly agree that go and look at other guys to fulfill that duty. But, every time Prefer was asked about it last year, he always said, hey, the hold was fine. Bailey would say the same thing after misses. So I don't, it could have just been, coaches and players lying or covering for other mistakes that were made, or maybe Matt Weil did have some issues. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out during the off season, during training camp, and what different players Zimmer looks at.
Let's talk about the running back situation and other places the Vikings might need help through the draft. I want to thank Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm insurance agent who works out of Champlin but can help you wherever you live. Hoaglund, insurance, financial services, auto insurance, home insurance, property insurance. As I always tell you, he handles my insurance. He handles Michael Russo's insurance. We're very happy with him.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
So they have another running back, but is he a backup running back?
Amir Abdullah to me is kind of this gadget guy that you use when the Vikings were actually dealing with some injuries at slot receiver. I remember one practice probably in November or early December where they were using Abdullah quite a bit in the slot position. So I kind of see him as a guy that isn't necessarily a number two, probably not a guy that you want to end up giving 10 carries a game to, but I think he can be a number three, a guy that contributes on special teams, is probably one of the guys you look at as a kick returner, a punt returner. But I honestly, I think if you're looking to hand the ball off to somebody other than Dalvin Cook, maybe 8-10 times a game, then I think you go with a guy like Mike Boone, who I was sort of impressed with, an undrafted rookie last year who came in and really did well in training camp and preseason. And I also think that they will look pretty heavily in the draft to maybe find a number two guy to complement Dalvin Cook.
I'm going to miss Marcus Sherrills, and not because he was this media figure who kissed up to people and gave great interviews. He rarely spoke. He didn't like talking about himself. Probably the best conversation I had with him over his 9 years with the Vikings was when I talked to him about Joe Mauer and other people. But he just, I know him from talking to Darryl Thompson. I know talking to other people in the Vikings organization. And a remarkable thing, he was undersized cornerback at the University of Minnesota, undrafted, and he ends up with a 9-year career just because of work ethic and intelligence and clutch performances.
Well, he was unbelievably reliable as a punt returner, especially, and so I think Mike Prefer had this great comfort level. He felt like there was rarely going to be a mistake made. Now, granted, there were not a ton of punt return touchdowns, but he was very good at being just a slippery little guy that could evade tackles and get you 8 to 10 yards on a lot of punt returns. And that was something Prefer really valued. And I think they may want a little more explosiveness, and Sherrills, I was one of these that thought, okay, he's probably a guy who's just going to spend his entire career here. I think after Prefer left, it may have, he may have started saying, okay, well, there's not a ton of interest for the Vikings to bring me back. And with as late as he was getting in his career, maybe look to go to another team that is definitely a contender with the Saints, at least for a year. With as long as they have Drew Brees, I think they are going to be a contender. And so I don't blame Sherrills for going and taking that before the market dried up. It just doesn't sound like the Vikings were aggressive at all in going after him, probably wanted to look at other options. And so I think it was the right move for Sherrills to move on before nobody was looking for help at that as a punt return, potential kick return guy for them.
Absolutely. Now they, it'll be interesting to see what they do at punt return. It could be Abdullah, but that is not their foremost need. As they go into the draft here, what do you think their foremost needs are?
Well, clearly they still need a guard, probably a left guard, because to me it looks like you're probably going to have Riley Reif at left tackle, Elflein at center, Josh Klein at right guard, and Brian O'Neill at right tackle. So I think left guard is a huge need for them. There's also the possibility that they could look to draft a tackle, and maybe one of their tackles like Reif slides inside. It's a possibility. I think ideally, though, Reif is probably a tackle. defensive tackle, I still think they're 3 technique. They need to find somebody there long term that is going to be a little bit more explosive than Shamar Stephen. Stephen's, to me, a really nice backup nose tackle and 3 technique guy, but probably not the guy you want there long term at the 3 technique. I mentioned backup running back, and I also think they need to find a tight end to complement Kyle Rudolph a little bit better and maybe be able to move into that role whenever Rudolph's career with the Vikings starts to wind down.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Free agency isn't over yet, but I think the draft is going to be. Listen, the Vikings have been in a position the last few years where, of course, you want to nail your first round pick, but they didn't need to nail their first round pick to have a good team. They could have had a good team without Trey Waynes. They could have had. They could have had a good team without Mike Hughes. This feels like a draft where they actually need to draft well to impact the current team.
I completely agree. I think it has to happen with their offensive line pick for sure. They do need some help in the interior of the defensive line, but this is also a position that they expected to be in. I remember Zimmer and Spielman have both kind of mentioned over the past year and a half that their roster was trending this way, where they had a bunch of guys coming up for contracts and now have re-signed those guys: Anthony Barr, Daniil Hunter, Eric Kendrick, Stephon Diggs. And those guys are going to take up a lot of the top end salary. And that means they're going to have to be, their roster's a lot of top end guys, and they're going to have a lot of these second tier of free agency guys and guys in their rookie contracts that are making up the rest of the salary cap, because you just can't have $10 million players all over the board. That's just the way the NFL is. And so it wasn't unexpected, but now the pressure is on to draft well and hit on some immediate contributors in those first few rounds.
No question about it. He's Tim Yoder from VikingUpdate.com. I'm Jim Suhan from the Star Tribune. We appreciate everybody listening. Thanks to our sponsors, Twirl and the Dining Galleria, Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent in Champlin, and BiteSquad.com, promo code TALKNORTH. Thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton. Do you have a final thought for us, Tim?
Well, I started out with the Josh Klein signing, and I find it really interesting how many of these guys now are familiar to the Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan coaching scheme. And Josh Klein is another guy. Last year with the Titans, he was under Matt LaFleur, who was influenced by Kyle Shanahan. And it's also interesting, though, that while Klein is familiar with the outside zone schemes that the Vikings are going to be running quite a bit this year, in Tennessee last year under that scheme was not one of his better graded years in his career. So to me, it's going to be interesting to see if Klein turns into, a 3-year starter for the Vikings or a stopgap 1-year guy until they can continue to build the roster with younger guys that end up taking those jobs.
We'll keep breaking down free agency, the draft, other NFL moves. Also, check out Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider for the executive view and historical view of the Vikings and the league. We appreciate everybody who listens. Subscribe at iTunes or whatever your podcast app you use. Rate us, whatever. We appreciate all the listens, and we'll talk to you next week.